Hello everyone and welcome back to the Football Tribe UG channel. Robert Kesakos is your usual suspect. I welcome back to yet another edition on your favorite football updates channel. Robert Kesakos is my name. Yeah, the news is Ruben Amorim has been sacked at Manchester United. That news broke this afternoon at around midday for us, or at around 1 p.m. Should have been 10 a.m. Over in the UK. It's news that we had expected after Ruben Amorim talked himself into out of the job. That means Ruben Amorim becomes the third manager this season to talk themselves out of a job. First in the season was Nuno Espirito Santo when he came out with unkind comments early on in the season over his boss Evangelos Marinakis, speaking of how their relationship had broken down or had grown distant or apart following the appointment of Edu Gaspar Daoud as the head of football affairs under Evangelos Marinakis' different clubs, including Nottingham Forest, Olympiacos, and another club, I think Rio Ave in Portugal. So we had that. Then next was the October manager of the month, Enzo Maresca. He did come out prior to their 2-0 victory against Everton just recently in December, when he said he had had the longest 48 hours in his career as a Chelsea manager prior to that victory, speaking about how some people within the club did not support the team, how he felt a lack of support for his duties. And then eventually we got to learn of the breakdown in relationship with the medical team, which according to Chelsea's mode of operation is quite independent over what you traditionally have at another club. Ordinarily, you have a medical department who of course report to the manager or the head coach on injury issues and things like that, on what the expectations are for players that have been out or players that are still out and things like that. But with Chelsea, the independent medical department get to determine when players do come back. They get to determine how often they play or how many minutes they play in terms of load management when they return from injuries. So apparently there were breakdown in a relationship between those two departments, between Enzo Maresca. But overall, again, the results were also not going his way. So eventually they part ways prior to their game against Manchester City, which ended in a 1-1 draw over the weekend when Tijani Reyenda's squad and Enzo Fernandez's late equalizer cancelled out the two sides for a 1-1 draw. Now, we spoke about Ruben Amorim for the comments that he made, because he equally has talked himself out of a job. After their 1-1 draw against Leeds United, he came out with certain comments that I deemed unworthy of a man in his position. One, I thought he would have selected his words more carefully, because he came out to say, I am here to be manager of Manchester United, not head coach, not coach. He went on to say, I know my name is not Antonio Conte, it's not Jose Mourinho, it's not Thomas Tuchel, but I'm here to be manager of Manchester United. Of course, he went on a bit of a rant, and this was in the aftermath of reports that we had received that he had had a breakdown in relationship with the head of football, Jason Wilcox at Manchester United. Now, we know Jason Wilcox was selected to be the head of football, and of course does help with leading the recruitment exercises at Manchester United. So during that press conference, he did say that everybody needs to do their job, that he needs to do his job as a manager, and he said, if I do my job, let the scouting department, let the recruitment department, let the sporting director all do their jobs. Now, even when you've had disagreements internally within the ranks of the team, I do not think it serves your own reputation or your stature within the club to come out and sort of allude to an idea that perhaps certain people within certain positions within the club are not doing their jobs. Whether you think they're not doing it well enough, that's an internal matter to handle. Now, again, he was being asked a question about his future or whether he feels supported from the board, and he went on a bit of a rant. And the words he chose within that moment, I thought would land him into trouble. And it wasn't long after that we started getting reports that tensions were beginning to rise within the Manchester United echelons of power, and similar to the situation that we had at Chelsea. And my prediction was, unfortunately, against my better judgment or my better preference in terms of what the destination should be, because I was an advocate for Enzo Maresca to stay, for Amorim to stay until the end of the season, and same as with Thomas, Frank at Tottenham Hotspur, to see out the remainder of the season, and then the respective clubs can assess. But I did acknowledge that having made those comments, it was only a matter of time before he ended up with the same fate that we saw Enzo Maresca end up in. And this morning, it has been confirmed that Manchester United have fired Ruben Amorim after 14 months into the job. The 40-year-old Portuguese manager joined the club in November last year from Sporting Lisbon, and results have not gone his way. And for me, the challenge is the situation is not different from what we had with Erik ten Hag before he was sacked. Last season, I think towards the tail end of October, around that period, because one, you complete a season, you assess the season, and feel that there are certain things that are wanting. Now, of course, if he had been sacked at the end of the season, a lot of people would have felt it was a premature decision. A lot of people would have felt that he had not been accorded enough time to prove himself. Now, but there was also a group of people, or at least Manchester United fans, or pundits, or football enthusiasts, who thought after their 1-0 defeat against Tottenham Hotspur in the finals of the Europa League at San Mamés, that goal by Brennan Johnson was a result enough to warrant a sacking for Ruben Amorim. Then secondly, them finishing 15th on the Premier League table, only ahead of Wolverhampton Wanderers, who are 16th, and Tottenham Hotspur, who are 17th, other than the teams that got relegated, was again a kind of performance, a kind of result, a kind of outcome that gets a Manchester United manager sacked. So there would have been a lot of people who would have come to table and say, get that man out as soon as yesterday. We know he's not been given a lot of time, but based on what we've seen, he is not the man to cut it. And at the start of this season, results have not been, again, that good. Really, Manchester United are 6th on the Premier League table. It's really, really not easy to say that you have been convinced with the direction in terms of results that United are taking. Then, the disagreements between him and the head of football, Jason Wilcox, stem from his lack of adaptability. According to multiple reports that we were receiving, a lot of times Ruben Amorim has been spoken to about his system. And you see, my view about the system was that a system is just a system for players within which to operate. It's just a framework. How they implement themselves within that system is what tells you whether it will work or not. Now, based on the evidence that we have seen of Manchester United, it did prove not to be working. And it wasn't just us demanding for a change of things. Looks like even within the Manchester United hierarchy, they seem to agree that perhaps the players he has were more suited to a 4-3-3 kind of system than a 3-4-2-1 kind of system. Now, we saw him change that very system, and it got him a result against, I think, Newcastle. When they beat up against Newcastle by a 1-0, that goal scored, I think, by Patrick Dogu. And then he also changed his system prior to, I think, the victory against Newcastle, and it seemed to give promise. It seemed to give promise, but overall, results have not gone his way, because in the last two games against Wolverhampton Wanderers and against Leeds, he reverted back to the same old system, the 3-4-2-1 kind of system, which has worked to his detriment. So Jason Wilcox, of course, as head of football, he must have sat in his office thinking, yes, I'm not the head coach, but I think if perhaps we adapt to this kind of model, maybe it will help us in the interim to get results on board, And Ruben Amorim did not see eye to eye with that. He did not agree. And you remember, for many times, he did say that he would rather resign or he would rather step down as than him change his system. So it wasn't as easy as a walk in the park to sort of have him change his mind or his convictions about that very system. So you have a breakdown in relationship with the head of football, and then he goes off like a loose cannon in the post-match press conference against, in that after that 1-1 draw against Leeds United, which was a perfect score prediction for us on the channel at Football Tribe UG, and it felt like he was living on thin ice because that result came in the aftermath of them drawing against arguably the worst team in the Premier League, which was Wolverhampton Wanderers in another 1-1 draw. And that was a home game at Old Trafford for a team that had beaten by 4 goals to 1 in the first round. So there's a lot of factors there. Of course, the defeat to Aston Villa did not do him any favors, nor did the 4-4 draw against FC Bournemouth. Now, according to multiple sources, this is according to Sam Wallace of The Telegraph, he says that Manchester United made the decision to sack Ruben Amorim before the draw with Leeds on Sunday after a meeting between Ruben Amorim and Jason Wilcox blew up. Wilcox had intended the meeting to be a positive look at the evolution of the team, but when the 3-4-3 system was raised, Amorim was angry. So again, it has everything to do with football. Now, Ruben Amorim himself was angry. Why? Because it does appear like he was made certain promises by the Manchester United hierarchy, whether it was by Jason Wilcox, whether it was Omar Barreda, whether it was Sir Jim Ratcliffe, I do not know. But that entire group of people are practically also responsible for what just happened, because they seem to have made him the promise that, look, you're going to have resources at your disposal to tweak and change this club. And that means perhaps a change in personality in terms of players who are more adaptable to his system. I'm sure by the time Manchester United appointed him, they knew very, very well the kind of manager he is, the kind of system he plays, So it was no surprise that he played that 3-4-3 system, or the 3-4-2-1 kind of system with one striker at the tip and then, of course, 2 number 10s. The same thing that Crystal Palace play. Now, but as a modern day manager, you must adapt to the circumstances or the situations you find yourself in. If you have one system that is clearly not working, then tweaking it to try and get results is never a bad thing. In any case, we see managers do that game in, game out. They know if I'm facing off with Manchester City, I must play in a certain way. When you're up against teams like Brentford, they'll know I'll have to maybe deploy a back 5 as opposed to a back 4. And I play with a back 5 with maybe a set of 3 midfielders and 2 players who are playing as a twin in that kind of sense. And then if I'm playing against Crystal Palace, I'll go to a 4-3-3 or a 4-4-2 kind of system. It does happen all the time. When Manchester City visited the Emirates Stadium earlier this season, we saw Pep Guardiola play in a conservative manner for the first time in his career in terms of being too defensive and looking to catch the team on a counter-attack and leverage on that and get a result. He nearly got a win had it not been for that late equalizer by Gabriel Martinelli. So that adaptiveness in a manager is what most people expected in Ruben Amorim within Manchester United. But did they see it come? No, it never came. It was on a few occasions, and he retreated back. So overall, they did not see that adaptiveness. And in that same press conference, he said he came to be a manager. Well, his title, according to the club, according to the statement put out, is head coach. Now, a lot of people would be wondering, what's the difference between manager and head coach? Well, it's about in the roles outlined and where your powers lie. So, for example, I know a modern day manager's role has transformed from what it used to be. For example, Sir Alex Ferguson, managers like Arsene Wenger had a say in one, player recruitment, how much players got paid, when players get let go for holidays, breaks, and etc. A lot of things. They controlled so many things within and around the club. who came on as a coach, who came in as an employee within certain positions, who came in as sporting director, who came in as a head of recruitment, and usually that role of sporting director was not very, very prominent. But, they had certain says within those decisions. Now, a modern day manager may not have a say in how much a player gets paid. He may have a say in what player gets brought in and what player exits the club. He may have a say, but he may not have a say in other matters pertaining that particular player. 2, a head coach. When it comes to a head coach, usually you have a sporting director or a director of football who is charged with the recruitment and team building, ins and outs of the teams. Look at the model at Real Madrid. At Real Madrid, Florentino Perez and his group of people with whom he works with decide what players get recruited within that team. And it is up to the head coach or the man that they put in charge to get results out of that team. Rarely do those managers or head coaches at Real Madrid decide what players get to be brought in. You may have a say in 1 or 2, 3 figures, but the overall structure of the team is decided by powers other than the coach. So, in this particular case, at Manchester United, if you're a head coach, then you're there to coach those players that you've been given to get results out of them. For those of you that care to remember, for purposes of final context, when Mikel Arteta got appointed at Arsenal, he came in as head coach. And it was after perhaps convincing his bosses that he was worthy of more responsibilities, was he elevated to the level of manager. So, Ruben Amorim is out. Now the big question is, who comes in to replace him? Now, of course, Darren Fletcher, former club player. I don't know whether he qualifies to be a legend, but he was a very, very purposeful player at Manchester United, has been given the role as an interim manager as Manchester United get to look into their recruitment to see who will be their next manager. Of course, quickly, names are like Oliver Glasner, Enzo Maresca, Mauricio Pochettino, Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, Joachim Low, all who are out of work currently have been floated around, Ivan Juricic, and so many others. But the most prominent names that you'll hear Oliver Glasner, you'll hear Enzo Maresca, and those names you'll hear them very, very often. You'll hear Mauricio Pochettino. I do not know really whether I do not know whether Ole Gunnar Solskjaer could be brought back, but those names you will hear. Now, again, according to Ndia Kaila News, he does say that Oliver Glasner has apparently prepared a 1,000-page document on Manchester United's tactics. He knew his time would come for an interview. And we've been talking about this almost the entire season, that Oliver Glasner is interested in the Manchester United job. We know that his contract runs out at the end of the season and he won't be renewing it at Crystal Palace. Will Manchester United stick with Darren Fletcher as the interim until the end of the season? That remains to be seen. But according to David Austin of The Athletic, Manchester United may not be looking to recruit a permanent manager halfway the season, that they could wait until the end of the summer. The other big question is, which Premier League manager will get sacked next? Nuno Espirito Santo at West Ham is high on that list for candidates. Thomas Frank at Tottenham Hotspur is not safe, nor is Anna Slot at Liverpool. Those are managers to watch, as well as Rob Edwards at Wolverhampton Wanderers. Only time will tell who gets the sack next. Leave me your thoughts down in the comment section, and I'll let you know what will come up next with time. Only time will tell what Manchester United will become in the absence of Ruben Amorim. But Enzo Maresca is there for the taking. Will he wait for the Manchester City job? Or if Manchester United knock at his door, he will answer the call. What are your thoughts?